Snow drifted silently across the streets of Black Ridge City. By 6 o'clock in the evening, most office workers had already gone home. Luxury sedans disappeared one after another into the winter traffic. Only the underground parking garage remained awake. Dim lights reflected across polished concrete. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and fresh detergent. Near Elevator C, Emma Brooks slowly pushed an old yellow cleaning cart. At 29 years old, Emma had spent the last 6 years cleaning one of the most prestigious office towers in the city. She was never the first person people noticed. In fact, most executives walked past her every morning without making eye contact. Some never even realized the same woman quietly cleaned their offices every night. Emma never complained. She simply smiled and kept working, because someone had once told her, kindness isn't valuable because people notice it. It's valuable because someone needs it. Those words had belonged to her grandmother. Emma still carried them in her heart every single day. She stopped beside a marble pillar and checked her watch. 6:12 p.m. Only 4 more floors, she whispered to herself. Then she smiled. If I finish early, I can visit Noah before the hospital closes. Her younger brother had been recovering from heart surgery for almost 3 weeks. Every evening, Emma brought him homemade soup. She couldn't afford expensive gifts, so she brought the only thing she believed mattered: time. Just as she reached the far corner of level B3, a sharp metallic sound echoed through the garage. Clang. A walking cane rolled across the concrete floor. Emma looked up immediately. An elderly man stood beside a black luxury sedan. One hand pressed tightly against his chest. The other searched desperately for support. His breathing became uneven. Pain twisted across his face. Then, his knees buckled. He collapsed. Emma didn't hesitate. The cleaning cart tipped over behind her. Mop, bucket, bottles, everything scattered across the floor. She sprinted toward him. "Sir." The old man struggled for air. His lips slowly turned pale. Emma remembered the emergency response training every building employee had attended years earlier. She knelt beside him. "It's okay. I'm here." He barely opened his eyes. His voice cracked. "Medicine." Emma searched quickly. A small pill bottle lay several feet away. She grabbed it, called emergency services, activated the wall-mounted emergency alarm, then gently supported his shoulders. "Stay with me. My name is Emma. You don't know me, but I'm not leaving." Minutes felt like hours. The old man's breathing became weaker. His fingers trembled. Fear filled his eyes. Emma reached forward. Without thinking, she held his hand. "My grandfather used to say, the hardest part isn't the pain. It's believing you're alone." She smiled through her own fear. "So you're not alone anymore." The old man's breathing slowly steadied. Not because the pain had disappeared, because someone remained beside him. High above the parking garage, inside the security control room, 3 guards watched dozens of surveillance screens. One camera suddenly caught their attention. What happened on camera 22? The supervisor zoomed in. His expression changed instantly. "Oh no." He immediately picked up the emergency radio. "Medical team to B3. Hurry." One younger guard frowned. "Who's the old gentleman?" The supervisor looked horrified. "You've only worked here 2 weeks. That's Richard Moretti." The guard blinked. "The Richard Moretti?" The supervisor nodded. "Father of Adrian Moretti." Silence filled the room. Every employee in the city knew that name. Adrian Moretti. Officially, a billionaire investor. Unofficially, the most powerful man no newspaper dared investigate. People whispered about his influence. Politicians respected him. Criminals feared him. And above everything else, everyone knew one thing: he would destroy anyone who harmed his family. The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later. Paramedics rushed toward Emma. "Step back!" One medic immediately attached heart monitors. Another prepared oxygen. A third looked at Emma. "Were you the one keeping him conscious?" She nodded. "I just talked to him." The medic smiled. "You did exactly the right thing." He looked toward his partner. "If she'd walked away." He stopped, then quietly finished. "We would have been too late." Emma closed her eyes for one brief second. Relief washed over her. "Thank goodness," she whispered. "He's going to be okay." As the ambulance doors closed, Emma picked up her fallen mop. She collected the broken cleaning supplies, straightened her uniform, and quietly returned to work. She never asked the man's name, never expected thanks, never imagined that someone had recorded every second. 40 minutes later, black SUVs surrounded St. Gabriel Medical Center. Their arrival was so sudden that hospital security instinctively stepped aside. Doctors exchanged nervous glances. Several nurses whispered, "He's here." Adrian Moretti walked through the emergency entrance without slowing. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark-tailored suit. His neatly trimmed beard framed a face that revealed almost nothing. The intricate tattoos climbing above his collar hinted at a life few understood. Behind him, 8 bodyguards followed silently. The chief cardiologist approached. "Mr. Moretti, my father." Adrian's voice remained calm. "Is he alive?" "Yes." The doctor nodded. "But..." He hesitated. "Another 5 minutes. I'm not sure we could have saved him." For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed Adrian's face. Not fear. Gratitude. "What happened?" The doctor turned toward the security supervisor. He wasn't alone. The supervisor handed Adrian a tablet. "We thought you should see this." The surveillance footage began to play. Adrian watched silently. The video showed his father collapsing. Then, a woman in a gray janitor's uniform ran into frame. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look around to see if someone more important would help. She simply knelt beside a stranger. She stayed. She comforted him. She held his hand. She smiled even while speaking to emergency services. She remained until the ambulance left. Then, she quietly picked up her mop and continued cleaning. No applause, no cameras, no reward. The video ended. The room remained silent. Adrian replayed the final 30 seconds, again and again. Finally, he asked one question. "Who is she?" The security supervisor checked the employee database. Emma Brooks, night janitor, 6 years with Ashford Financial Center. No disciplinary record, no promotions, no complaints. Adrian stared at the paused image. Emma was smiling at his unconscious father, as though helping strangers was the most ordinary thing in the world. He handed the tablet back. "Find her." The supervisor nodded immediately. "When?" Adrian's dark eyes never left the frozen image on the screen. "Before sunrise." The emergency room doors slowly closed behind Adrian Moretti. For several seconds, he remained standing in the hallway, his eyes fixed on the security footage frozen on the tablet. Emma Brooks, night janitor. She had risked everything for a stranger, then quietly returned to work as if nothing extraordinary had happened. That kind of person was becoming impossible to find. Meanwhile, several miles away, Emma unlocked the door to room 407 at St. Gabriel Children's Wing. The smell of warm soup immediately filled the room. Her younger brother, Noah, looked up from his hospital bed and smiled. "You almost missed visiting hours." Emma laughed softly. "I got held up at work." She didn't mention the old man. She didn't think it mattered. Noah accepted the container of homemade chicken soup. "You skipped dinner again, didn't you?" Emma avoided his eyes. "I'm not hungry." He raised an eyebrow. "You always say that." She smiled instead of answering. The truth was simple. She had enough money for one proper meal tonight. She chose Noah's, just like every other night. Across the city, inside Moretti Manor, doctors surrounded Richard Moretti's bed. The old man was awake now. Weak, but alive. Adrian stood beside the window with his arms crossed. His father looked toward him. "You found her?" Adrian shook his head. "Not yet." Richard smiled faintly. "Then don't thank her." Adrian frowned. "What?" "People like her. They become embarrassed when you make them feel like heroes." He coughed softly. "If you want to repay kindness, protect it." At that exact moment, a black sedan stopped outside Ashford Financial Center. 3 men stepped out. None of them wore company uniforms. The tallest carried a photograph. Emma Brooks. The building's security guard approached. "Can I help you?" The man smiled politely. "We're looking for one of your cleaning staff." The guard looked suspicious. "Why?" "We simply have a few questions." He produced what appeared to be an investigator's badge. The guard hesitated, then shook his head. "She's already gone home." The man thanked him, walked back to the sedan, and his smile disappeared. "Find her address." 1 hour later, Daniel Ross entered Adrian's office carrying a fresh report. "We've located Miss Brooks." Adrian looked up. "Good. She lives in East Harbor." Daniel hesitated. "But," Adrian immediately noticed. "What?" "Someone else requested her employee records tonight." Silence. "Who?" "They used forged credentials. They failed. But they knew her name." Adrian's expression darkened. "Trace them. We're trying." Emma finally returned to her apartment just after midnight. The building was old. Paint peeled from the hallway walls. The elevator had been broken for nearly a year. She climbed 4 flights of stairs, carrying groceries in one hand, laundry in the other. She unlocked the door. The apartment was barely large enough for 2 people. 1 small bedroom, 1 sofa, a tiny kitchen. Yet everything inside was spotless. Emma believed, no matter how little someone owned, they deserved a clean home. She placed Noah's medicine schedule on the refrigerator, then sat quietly by the window. Her legs ached. Her shoulders burned. She closed her eyes and finally allowed herself one deep breath. Outside, a black sedan rolled slowly past her apartment building. Its headlights switched off. One of the passengers lifted binoculars. "There she is." The driver asked, "Are we taking her?" The man looked through the window. Emma was watering a small potted plant, completely unaware. "No, not tonight. I want to know what she heard." The next morning, Emma arrived at work before sunrise. She pushed her cleaning cart toward the lobby. Something immediately felt different. People kept looking at her, whispering, smiling. She frowned. Had she forgotten something? The security supervisor hurried toward her. "Emma, can you come with me?" Her heart sank. "Am I in trouble?" He smiled. "I don't think so." They entered the executive elevator. Emma had never been inside before. Only senior executives used it. Her hands became sweaty. "Sir, I clean the executive floor on weekends. I've never touched anything. I promise." The supervisor chuckled. "No one's accusing you." The elevator doors opened. The top floor stretched before her. Marble floors, glass walls, art worth millions. Emma had only seen this place from a distance. At the end of the hallway, Daniel Ross waited. "Miss Brooks." She immediately lowered her head. "Good morning. I'm Daniel Ross. I know. You work for Mr. Moretti." Daniel smiled. "He'd like to meet you." Emma's face turned pale. "The owner?" "Yes." She instinctively stepped backward. "There must be some mistake." "There isn't. I only clean here." Daniel opened the office door. "Exactly." Inside, Adrian Moretti stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He turned slowly. For the first time, Emma saw the man whose name everyone whispered with equal parts admiration and fear. He looked nothing like the newspapers described. There was no arrogance, no display of power. only quiet intensity. Emma nervously clutched the handle of her cleaning cart. "I'm sorry if I did something wrong." Adrian stared at her. The first words she spoke were another apology. "Just like the woman in the hospital video." He finally said, "No, you saved my father's life." Emma froze. "Your father?" "The gentleman in the parking garage." Her eyes widened. "Oh, is he all right?" "Not." "Who are you?" "Not." "Will I lose my job?" Her first concern was the old man's health. Adrian noticed, and something inside him shifted. "He'll recover." Emma smiled with visible relief. Thank goodness. Silence filled the office. Finally, Adrian picked up a small envelope. "My family wishes to thank you." Emma looked at it, then gently pushed it back. "I'm sorry. I can't accept money." Daniel blinked. Most people would have accepted before reading the amount. Emma hadn't even looked. Adrian asked quietly, "Why?" She smiled. "I helped him because he needed help. If someone pays me afterward, it'll feel like I helped for the wrong reason." Even Daniel found himself speechless. Adrian slowly lowered the envelope. In all his years, he had never met anyone who refused generosity without even asking how much it was. Before he could speak again, Daniel's phone vibrated violently. He answered. His expression changed immediately. "What?" Adrian noticed. "What happened?" Daniel lowered the phone. "Our cybersecurity team just confirmed. The people who tried accessing Emma's employee records." He paused. "Weren't looking for her employment history. They were trying to locate her home address." The room fell completely silent. Emma looked confused. "My address?" Adrian's eyes narrowed. For the first time, he no longer believed the heart attack in the parking garage had been a random tragedy. Someone was searching for the woman who had saved his father's life, and he intended to find out why. The black SUV glided silently through the rain. Inside Adrian Moretti's office, no one spoke. Daniel placed his phone on the desk. "Our cybersecurity team traced the attack." Adrian looked up. "Tell me." The hackers weren't interested in company records. Daniel tapped the screen. They searched only 3 things. Emma Brooks, her home address, and, he paused, St. Gabriel Children's Hospital. Emma frowned. "My brother's hospital?" Daniel nodded slowly. "They know about Noah." The color drained from Emma's face. A heavy silence settled over the room. Adrian stood motionless. Someone wasn't simply looking for Emma. They had already begun investigating everyone she loved. He turned toward Daniel. "How long before they find her apartment?" Daniel answered honestly. "If they're professionals, they probably already have." Emma tried to remain calm. "There has to be a mistake. I don't know anyone. I've never hurt anyone." Adrian finally spoke. "My father has enemies. Many of them." She looked confused. "But I only helped him." "Exactly." His voice remained quiet. "You helped someone they wanted dead." The realization struck her all at once. The old man hadn't simply suffered a heart attack. Someone may have been waiting for him to die. Daniel's phone rang again. He answered immediately. His expression hardened. "What?" The room became still. After several seconds, he lowered the phone. Our security team arrived at Emma's apartment. Emma instinctively stood. "My apartment?" Daniel looked at Adrian before answering. "The front door has been forced open." Emma's heartbeat stopped. "What about my neighbors?" "No one was injured. But someone searched the apartment. They left everything valuable behind. They only opened drawers. They photographed documents. They took nothing." Emma whispered. "They were looking for me." Adrian picked up his keys. "Daniel, prepare the convoy." Emma blinked. "What convoy? You're leaving." She stared at him. "I can't. My brother. We'll bring him too. I don't even know you." "No." he answered calmly. But the people searching for you don't care. 30 minutes later, St. Gabriel Children's Hospital. Noah looked surprised as 4 men in dark suits entered his room. Emma hurried inside. Noah, we have to leave. He frowned. The doctor said I can go home tomorrow. The plan changed. Noah noticed Adrian standing quietly outside the room. He leaned toward his sister. Who's that? Emma whispered. I honestly don't know. The attending physician approached Adrian. Mr. Moretti. The boy is stable, but transporting him tonight. I've already arranged a private medical team. The doctor nodded respectfully. Within minutes, a specialized ambulance stood waiting outside. Emma watched everything unfold in disbelief. She had spent months struggling to pay Noah's medical bills. Now, an entire medical transport team had appeared because one man made a phone call. During the drive, rain hammered against the windows. Noah quietly studied Adrian. Finally, he asked, Are you famous? Emma nearly choked. Noah, what? The teenager smiled innocently. He looks like someone from one of those crime movies. For the first time that day, Daniel laughed. Adrian almost smiled. Something like that. The convoy passed through enormous iron gates. Emma looked outside. Her eyes widened. The estate stretched farther than she could see. Ancient oak trees lined the driveway. Stone fountains shimmered beneath soft lights. Security guards stood every 100 feet. This, she whispered, is your house? Daniel corrected gently. The Moretti estate. Emma suddenly felt completely out of place. She looked down at her worn sneakers, her cleaning uniform, her faded jacket. Everything about her seemed to belong somewhere else. Inside the mansion, staff members quietly greeted Adrian. Their eyes immediately fell upon Emma and Noah. Curiosity spread through the hallway. Who were they? No guest had ever entered the estate wearing a janitor's uniform. An elderly housekeeper approached. Mr. Moretti, the guest rooms are prepared. Adrian nodded. Thank you, Maria. Maria smiled warmly at Emma. Come with me, dear. Emma hesitated. I don't want to cause trouble. Maria gently squeezed her hand. Anyone Mr. Moretti protects is family while they're here. Emma wasn't sure she believed those words, but somehow, Maria did. Later that evening, Richard Moretti insisted on leaving the hospital against the doctor's recommendation. The moment he entered the mansion, his first question was, Where is the young lady? Maria guided Emma into the sitting room. The elderly man smiled the instant he saw her. There you are. Emma immediately bowed her head. I'm so happy you're feeling better. Richard chuckled. You're worried about me again? She blushed. I'm glad. He reached into his pocket. Emma instinctively stepped back. If it's money, I really can't. Richard laughed. I wasn't going to insult you. Instead, he held out a small wooden box. Inside was an old silver pocket watch. It belonged to my late wife. Emma looked horrified. I couldn't possibly. I want you to have it. She shook her head firmly. It's too precious. Richard smiled. Exactly. I've learned that precious things should be entrusted to precious people. Emma's eyes became moist. No one had ever called her precious before. Across the mansion, Adrian stood on the balcony with Daniel. The break-in wasn't random. Daniel nodded. Our investigators confirmed it. They ignored electronics. They ignored jewelry. They searched only for one thing. What? Daniel handed him a photograph, a faded envelope, recovered from Emma's apartment floor. It was hidden behind a family photograph. Adrian looked carefully. The envelope had already been opened. What was inside? Daniel answered quietly. Nothing. It was empty. Adrian frowned. So why steal it? Daniel took a slow breath. Because someone believed it wasn't empty. At the same time, Emma unpacked Noah's medicine inside the guest room. The silver pocket watch rested on the bedside table. She opened it absent-mindedly. Click. Something felt unusual. The back cover seemed thicker than normal. She pressed gently. A hidden compartment sprang open. Inside, folded tightly beneath the mechanism, was a tiny yellowed piece of paper. Emma unfolded it carefully. Only a few words had been written decades ago. If anything happens to me, trust only Anthony. Before she could read further, a cold voice came from the doorway. I wouldn't read that. Emma jumped. A tall man stood in the hallway. Expensive suit, perfect smile, but lifeless eyes. He looked at the note, then back at Emma. My name is Victor. He smiled pleasantly. I'm Mr. Moretti's cousin. He took one slow step into the room. And I think that paper belongs to me. Emma instinctively stepped backward. Something deep inside her whispered that this man wasn't there to ask. He was there to take. Emma instinctively folded the yellowed note behind her back. The man standing in the doorway never stopped smiling. My name is Victor Moretti. His voice was smooth, almost friendly, yet something about him made the room suddenly feel colder. I believe that paper belongs to my family. Emma forced a polite smile. I'm sorry. I don't know what you're talking about. Victor's eyes briefly flickered toward the silver pocket watch resting on the bedside table. I've been looking for that watch for years. He stepped closer. My uncle must have given it to you. Emma took one cautious step backward. It was a gift. Victor nodded slowly. Then I'm sure you won't mind returning it. Before Emma could answer, another voice echoed from the hallway. I would. Adrian. Victor turned around without changing his expression. Adrian. You arrived sooner than I expected. Adrian walked into the room. His eyes immediately found Emma, then the folded piece of paper hidden behind her hand. Finally, they settled on Victor. My father gave it to her. Victor smiled. Family heirlooms belong to the family. Adrian answered quietly. My father decides what belongs to whom. The two men stared at each other. Neither raised his voice. Neither moved. Yet Emma felt as though the room had become a battlefield. After several silent seconds, Victor adjusted his jacket. Very well. He smiled once more. I simply wanted to welcome our guests. He looked directly at Emma. I hope we'll have plenty of opportunities to talk. Then he walked away. Only after his footsteps disappeared did Emma finally breathe again. Adrian closed the bedroom door. Are you all right? Emma nodded. I think so. She hesitated. He frightened me. Adrian didn't seem surprised. He has that effect on people. Emma slowly unfolded the tiny piece of paper. I found this inside the watch. Adrian accepted it carefully. The paper had become fragile with age. The handwriting belonged to his late mother. He recognized it immediately. His heartbeat slowed. If anything happens to me, trust only Anthony, never Victor. Protect Adrian at all costs. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Emma finally whispered, Who is Anthony? Adrian stared at the note. My father's oldest friend. He disappeared 23 years ago. Emma frowned. Disappeared? No one has seen him since. Downstairs, Richard Moretti sat alone beside the fireplace. He looked exhausted. Adrian entered quietly and placed the note on the table. Richard froze. His trembling fingers slowly reached for the paper. I thought this was gone forever. He looked up at Adrian. Where did you find it? Inside Mother's watch. Richard closed his eyes. For a long moment, he simply held the paper against his chest. Then, very quietly, he said, I should have destroyed it. Emma remained near the doorway, unsure whether she should leave. Richard noticed her. No, stay. He smiled gently. You've already become part of this story. He looked back at the note. 24 years ago, our family wasn't united. There were men who believed power mattered more than blood. Adrian already knew the history. But Emma didn't. Richard continued. Anthony discovered something. He warned your mother. Emma listened carefully. What did he discover? Richard looked toward the fire. He discovered someone inside the family was selling information to our enemies. The room fell silent. Emma glanced instinctively toward the hallway where Victor had disappeared. Richard noticed. But we never found proof. At that exact moment, Daniel entered carrying a sealed folder. I'm sorry to interrupt, but our investigators found something. Adrian accepted the folder. Inside were photographs from the underground parking garage. Security cameras had captured every vehicle entering that evening. Daniel pointed at one black sedan. It appeared 20 minutes before your father collapsed. Another photograph. The same vehicle remained parked after the ambulance left. Another. It followed Emma home. Emma's hands became cold. They followed me? Daniel nodded. For almost 4 hours. Richard quietly asked, who owns the vehicle? Daniel looked uncomfortable. It was registered under a shell company. He hesitated. The company no longer exists. Adrian looked up. What about the driver? Daniel placed one final photograph on the table. The image was blurry, but the driver's face remained visible. Richard suddenly stood. The chair fell backward. No, his voice trembled. It can't be. Emma had never seen the old man afraid before. Do you know him? Richard slowly lowered himself back into the chair. I hoped. He was dead. The room became silent. Finally, Richard whispered one name. Anthony. Emma blinked. The man your wife trusted. Richard nodded weakly. If that's really him, everything we believed for 20 years was wrong. Later that night, Emma couldn't sleep. The mansion felt enormous. Every hallway echoed. Every shadow seemed alive. She quietly walked downstairs for a glass of water. As she passed the library, she heard voices. Victor, and someone else. She instinctively stopped behind the half-open door. Victor spoke calmly. So, the girl found the note. A second man answered. Should we remove her now? Emma's heart nearly stopped. Victor remained silent for several seconds. Then, no, not yet. As long as Richard believes she's safe, he'll eventually tell her everything. The second man asked. And then? Victor smiled. Then she'll lead us to what we've spent 20 years searching for. Emma covered her mouth to stop herself from gasping. Her foot shifted slightly. The old wooden floor creaked. Silence. Victor stopped talking. So, he said softly, it seems we have a listener. The library door began to open. Emma turned and ran. Barefoot across the marble hallway. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Fast, closing the distance. She reached the grand staircase. Then someone grabbed her wrist. Emma screamed. The lights suddenly switched on. Bodyguards rushed into the hallway. The man released her immediately, disappearing into the darkness before anyone could identify him. Breathing heavily, Emma looked around in panic. Adrian emerged from the opposite corridor. He saw the terror on her face. What happened? Emma struggled to catch her breath. She looked toward the library. I heard Victor, he said. Before she could finish, every light in the mansion went out. Complete darkness swallowed the estate. Then, a single gunshot echoed somewhere outside. The gunshot echoed across the estate. Then, silence. For nearly 3 seconds, no one moved. Adrian reacted first. Lock down the estate. His voice cut through the darkness. Immediately, emergency generators roared to life. Dim security lights flickered on. Bodyguards rushed in every direction. Within seconds, the peaceful mansion transformed into a fortress. Emma stood frozen. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Adrian reached her first. Are you hurt? She slowly shook her head. Before she could answer, Daniel ran into the hallway. The eastern security fence has been breached. How many? Only one confirmed intruder. Find him. Already searching. Outside. Rain poured heavily across the gardens. Flashlights swept through the trees. Security dogs searched every pathway. 10 minutes later, a bodyguard found something lying beside the stone fountain. A brass shell casing. Still warm. Another guard called out. No blood. Daniel examined the ground. No footprints either. Whoever had entered the estate had escaped like a ghost. Back inside, Emma sat quietly in the library. A blanket rested around her shoulders. Maria placed a cup of hot tea in front of her. My dear, drink. Emma wrapped both hands around the warm cup. She wasn't cold. She was shaking. Adrian entered the room. Everyone else quietly left. Only the two of them remained. He sat across from her. What did you hear? Emma hesitated, then took a slow breath. I couldn't sleep. I walked downstairs. I heard Mr. Victor talking. She closed her eyes. He said that I would eventually lead them to something they've been searching for. Adrian remained silent. And then? They knew someone was listening. I ran. Her voice became smaller. I think they were chasing me. Adrian leaned back. For several moments, he said nothing. Then, you weren't supposed to hear that. Emma looked confused. What do you mean? They never intended to kill you tonight. She stared at him. They wanted to frighten you. So you would run. So you would make mistakes. She slowly realized someone was using her, without even knowing it. Meanwhile, Richard Moretti sat alone in his private study. The old silver pocket watch rested in his hand. He stared at the hidden compartment for a long time, then quietly whispered, I can't hide it anymore. He reached beneath his desk, pressed a concealed switch. A section of the wooden bookshelf slid open. Behind it, a small steel safe appeared. Richard entered a 6-digit code. The heavy door unlocked. Inside lay an old leather journal. Its pages had yellowed with age. On the cover, only 3 words. The Raven Ledger. Richard carried the journal into Adrian's office. His son looked surprised. I've never seen that. You weren't supposed to. Richard placed it gently on the desk. This is the reason your mother died. Emma's breath caught. Richard slowly opened the first page. Instead of financial records, every page contained names, dates, photographs, secret transactions, government officials, business partners, organized crime figures. The journal documented decades of hidden alliances. If this ever became public, Richard whispered, half the city's most powerful men would go to prison. Emma looked at Adrian, then back at Richard. So, they're searching for this? Richard nodded. They've been searching for 23 years. Daniel entered suddenly. His face looked unusually serious. We have another problem. Adrian looked up. What now? Daniel placed a tablet on the desk. News footage filled the screen. A female reporter stood outside the gates of the estate. Sources claim the mysterious woman recently brought into the Moretti residence may have manipulated the elderly Richard Moretti shortly before receiving expensive gifts from the family. Emma stared in disbelief. What? Another headline appeared. Janitor accused of exploiting elderly billionaire. Another. Who is Emma Brooks? Another. Gold digger or hero? Within an hour, social media exploded. Old photographs from Emma's apartment appeared online. Pictures of Noah leaving the hospital. Private information. Even her childhood school records. Emma slowly lowered the tablet. I never asked for any of this. Her voice broke. I just wanted to help someone. Adrian quietly turned off the screen, then looked directly at Daniel. Who leaked her identity? Daniel answered immediately. We don't know. But the story spread too quickly. It was coordinated. Richard whispered. Victor. Adrian nodded once. He wants public opinion to destroy her. Emma looked completely lost. Why? Richard answered softly. Because if people stop believing you, they'll never believe the truth. Emma stood. Tears filled her eyes. I should leave. No, Adrian answered immediately. I've caused enough trouble. No. She looked at him. If I stay, people will think everything they're saying is true. Adrian slowly walked toward her. You still don't understand. She whispered. What? He looked directly into her eyes. They aren't attacking you, because you entered my family's life. He paused. They're attacking you, because you saved it. The room fell silent. Emma struggled to understand. Adrian continued. The moment you kept my father alive, you became the only person capable of changing everything. He glanced toward the Raven ledger. If he had died that night, this journal would have disappeared forever. Emma slowly looked at the old leather book. Then back at Adrian. For the first time, she understood. She had never been caught in the middle of someone else's war. Without realizing it, she had stopped it. Late that night, Victor stood inside an abandoned warehouse across the river. One of his men approached nervously. The smear campaign has started. Victor nodded. And the girl? Still inside the estate. Victor smiled faintly. It doesn't matter. He walked toward a dusty window overlooking the city. People always think wars are won with bullets. He slowly poured himself a glass of whiskey. They're wrong. They're won when you convince the innocent that they're guilty. He looked toward the glowing skyline. Emma Brooks is already beginning to believe she's the problem. He smiled. And that's exactly when she'll make the mistake I've been waiting for. Behind him, a phone vibrated. Victor answered. The caller spoke only one sentence. We've found Anthony. Victor's smile disappeared instantly. What? The voice repeated. He's alive. Victor slowly lowered the phone. For the first time in years, he looked genuinely afraid. The abandoned warehouse fell silent. Victor Moretti stared at the phone in his hand. Only 4 words echoed through his mind. Anthony is still alive. For 23 years. He had believed the only man who could expose the truth had disappeared forever. Now, everything was about to change. Across the city, inside the Moretti estate, Adrian stood alone in his father's study. The Raven ledger lay open on the desk. Every page revealed another betrayal, another secret alliance, another family destroyed by greed. Richard slowly walked beside his son. I wanted to burn it. Adrian looked up. What stopped you? Richard smiled sadly. Your mother. He gently touched the leather cover. She believed. Truth hidden long enough becomes another kind of lie. Daniel entered quietly. We found Anthony. Both men looked toward him. Where? A small monastery. 2 hours north. Richard closed his eyes. He's really alive. Daniel nodded. But he refuses to leave. He says he'll only speak to one person. Who? Daniel looked toward Emma. Him. Everyone turned. Emma blinked. Me? Emma couldn't understand. I've never met him. Daniel handed her an old photograph. It showed Anthony standing beside Richard and a little girl. Emma's breathing stopped. The little girl wore a tiny knitted sweater, the same sweater her grandmother had kept in an old photo album. She whispered, That's my grandmother. Richard looked shocked. You know this woman? Emma nodded slowly. She raised me. Richard sat down heavily. My God. So that's why. Adrian frowned. What? Richard smiled through tears. Your grandmother worked for my wife. She protected Anthony the night everything fell apart. He looked at Emma. Without knowing it, your family has been protecting ours for more than 20 years. The next morning, a convoy left the estate before sunrise. Snow covered the mountain roads. Emma sat silently beside Adrian. Neither spoke much. Both understood. Everything depended on the meeting ahead. The monastery rested high above the valley. Simple, peaceful, far removed from the violence of the outside world. An elderly monk greeted them. "Anthony has been expecting you." Emma looked surprised. "Expecting me?" The monk smiled gently. He said, "The granddaughter of the bravest woman he ever knew would eventually arrive." Anthony waited inside a small stone chapel. His hair had turned completely white. His hands trembled with age. The moment he saw Emma, he smiled. "You have your grandmother's eyes." Emma felt tears forming instantly. "You knew her?" "I owed her my life." He slowly stood, then turned toward Adrian. "And I owe your mother an apology." For nearly 2 hours, Anthony told the truth. Not rumors, not guesses. The truth. 23 years earlier, Victor had secretly worked with rival criminal organizations. He planned to eliminate Richard, then seize control of the Moretti empire. Adrian's mother discovered everything before she could expose him. She hid the evidence inside the Raven ledger. Anthony escaped with part of the proof. Emma's grandmother helped him disappear. She never accepted money. She simply said, "Some lives are worth protecting." Emma quietly smiled through her tears. Those words sounded exactly like something her grandmother would say. Daniel's phone suddenly rang. He answered. Then his face changed. "Adrian." "Our estate is under attack." Silence. "Victor?" Daniel nodded. "He knows Anthony is alive. He sent everyone." Within minutes, the convoy raced back toward the city. But Adrian knew they wouldn't arrive in time. Victor had made his final move. Back at the estate, gunfire echoed through the gardens. Bodyguards fought desperately to protect Richard. Victor slowly walked through the front entrance, calm, confident. He knew the Raven ledger was still somewhere inside. He smiled. "It's finally over." Half an hour later, Adrian's convoy reached the estate. Black SUVs stormed through the broken gates. The battle ended almost as quickly as it began. Victor attempted to escape through the greenhouse. He almost made it. Until he found Emma standing alone in the narrow stone pathway. She wasn't holding a weapon, only the silver pocket watch. Victor laughed. "Move." Emma shook her head. "No. You think kindness can stop me?" "No," she answered quietly. "But truth can." She held up her phone. Anthony's full testimony had already been uploaded, copied, sent to journalists, federal investigators, international prosecutors. Even if Victor escaped, the truth no longer belonged to one person. It belonged to everyone. For the first time, Victor realized he had already lost. He looked around. Police vehicles surrounded the estate. Helicopters circled overhead. Adrian stepped forward. Neither man raised a weapon. Victor slowly smiled. "You won." Adrian shook his head. "No, I didn't." He looked toward Emma. She did. Months later, the city looked different. Not because the buildings had changed, because the people inside them had. The criminal empire Victor once controlled had collapsed. Dozens of corrupt officials were arrested. Businesses once ruled by fear began operating legally. The Moretti Foundation announced the largest employee welfare initiative in its history. Scholarships, medical funds, housing assistance, mental health support. Every program carried the same name, the Emma Brooks Initiative. Emma protested countless times. "I don't deserve this." Richard smiled. "My dear, you spent your whole life making everyone else feel seen. It's finally your turn." Noah made a full recovery. He enrolled in medical school. "I want to become the doctor who gives families hope." Emma hugged him tightly. Their grandmother would have been proud. One quiet autumn afternoon, Emma returned to the underground parking garage. Everything looked exactly the same. The concrete floors, The yellow lines, the marble pillars. Only one thing had changed. Someone had placed a small bronze plaque beside the exact spot where Richard had collapsed. It read, "One act of kindness can change generations." Emma smiled softly. She reached down, running her fingers across the cool metal. "You were right, Grandma," she whispered. "Kindness matters, even when no one is watching." A familiar voice answered behind her. "I was watching." Emma turned. Adrian stood a few steps away, not surrounded by bodyguards, not wearing an expensive suit, just a simple, dark coat. For once, he looked less like the city's most feared mafia boss and more like an ordinary man. He walked toward her. "You know, I've spent my whole life believing power could solve everything." Emma smiled. "And now?" He looked at her. "Now I know. The strongest person I ever met was carrying a mop." Emma laughed through happy tears. "You still make me sound extraordinary." He gently shook his head. "No, you reminded all of us what ordinary kindness can accomplish." He extended his hand. "Would you walk with me?" Emma looked at the hand. The same hand that once ruled through fear, now offered with quiet respect. She placed hers in his, not because he was powerful, not because he was wealthy, but because she had come to know the man behind the reputation. Together, they walked slowly out of the parking garage, toward the afternoon sunlight, toward a future neither of them had expected, and somewhere beyond the city. If Emma's grandmother had been watching, she would have smiled, because the little girl she raised to help strangers had changed far more than one man's life. She had changed an entire family's legacy.